Hi, my name is Frederick Fulmer. I'm the director for the ASHER Gallery, and today we have a special guest artist who has the December show at ASHER Gray online at artsy.net, and that is Mary Addison Hackett. And I want to welcome you. I look forward to hearing about your story, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, well, okay. Well, thank you, Frederick, for inviting me to be in the show for December. A little bit about my practice as a whole is I've been working for about 35 years or more as an artist, and I work multidisciplinary, but primarily as a painter and with lens-based work. My work is diaristic in nature and reflects kind of the banalities of day-to-day life, and a lot of the work for the last 10 years or more has taken place in and around my home. I use both painting and photography and video, and I am fairly new to the desert. This is my third plus year of desert living, and I am originally from the South, but I'd lived in LA and Chicago before. So, but I was familiar with the Los Angeles and California, but the desert was new to me. So when I first moved out here, I was intending on having more of a post-studio practice and kind of being more mobile and outside of the studio proper. But I still have a paint studio, and I still am like kind of fascinated with the desert landscape here. So some of the earlier, there are a couple of pieces in the show that the titles are Desert Back, and then they have like additional titles to go with those. But those paintings were influenced by what's outside of my studio window and kind of the mythology that Joshua Tree in the desert has. The works that are in the show, the other works that are in the show are very specifically related to 2020 and the pandemic and just Black Lives Matters protest and the murder of Black people in our country by authority. And so all of that was kind of coming in all at the same time. And as you know, in California, we were on a lockdown. And so I pretty much retreated to the studio and was listening to a lot of news and just processed all of that through the watercolors. And I've got also a series of photographs that kind of go in tandem with the works on paper. So that's kind of, it's like Instacart deliveries. You'll see oranges in my paintings, and there's a lot of hash marks and kind of tick marks that were used both as a repetitive way of kind of, I guess, assimilating the pandemic and just, also making note of the death count, both with the pandemic and again with the Black Lives Matter protest, and so that's kind of where a lot of the work came from. It's not metaphorical so much, but there is I was thinking about systemic racism and the kind of, for lack of a better word, ineptitude of our current administration to deal with the pandemic early on. So I don't consider these works overtly political, but they definitely are in the category of the personal as political and how I was assimilating that information over the course of the spring and summer and going into the fall now.
Well, one of the things that strikes me about the work that you presented us with for December is that the colors are so vivid And there seems like an honoring of that space of being in the studio. I mean, you're talking about the social issues that are at hand, dealing with the pandemic, but at the same time, you're able to give us this sort of glorious, colorful landscape. I mean, it sort of very much reminds me of sort of those uplifting works of Matisse, and that you're in your studio creating these environments. At the same time, you're having this thought process about the underlying underbelly of the state of the nation and the pandemic. Um, so kudos that you were able to go in there and do that. I think for a lot of us as artists, we found it very difficult to put that aside and actually create work. I mean, I've heard this from more than one artist. So the fact that you, as a practicing artist, have actually dealt in to going to your studio, create these works, and at the same time, there's something very lively and life affirming about the work that you presented us.
Well, my studio is in my home, and I have lived and worked in the same space, not this studio, but just living and working in the same area for many years, and I prefer that. Rather, I have had separate studios where I've had to leave, but fortunately during the pandemic, I was kind of already used to working at home, so it was just a matter of like kind of going into the next room and working. Watercolor and gouache being a water-based medium, it was the first medium I ever used. So I've been working with it a really long time. And I used to work large paintings, like 8 by 5 foot, 8 by 6 and larger. And I scaled my practice down size-wise intentionally several years ago. But the watercolors were always this kind of in-between practice, like they would make them in between these large paintings. But I had a stash of works of paper, which is kind of my emergency go-to supply of materials. And watercolor is a very meditative medium for me. So it really, I think it just came across as like that need to do something other than, I also have a Zen practice sometimes where I sit. It's been a little sloppy lately, but making the watercolors is much more of a Zen meditative practice for me too. So I work standing up, and I just kind of get this laser focus when I'm working with that particular medium.
So some of the ones that we have posted that we wanted to talk about today, the imagery seems very landscape-like. Is that something because you were looking outside your window of the studio and something caught your eye and you captured that moment, sort of as a
Yeah,
metaphor?
I work both abstractly and representationally, and I've been kind of I go back and forth, and at this point I don't really call it one or the other at this point. But about 10 years ago, I had never really painted true observationally, but I had been teaching observational drawing for many years. So I kind of picked up on my own teaching. I mean, I was really not an observational painter at all. And again, that happened to be a very meditative process. And so yes, I look out my window. I also go and collect items from the yard or the landscape, and I bring them in. And so sometimes I'll work true observation, and sometimes I kind of organize that chaos into some kind of structure. And that's another thing that with the watercolors, I call it my watercolor hand. My watercolors throughout the years always tend to have more of for like not a standard look, but they don't veer much from the path of my watercolor hand. Whereas with my other works, I feel more comfortable jumping around in both styles and genres. So yeah, I have some oleander back out there, and I'll like clip leaves from the oleander and bring those into the studio. And I was trying to get fresh flowers once we kind of left the Instacart world. I'm looking back at one of my paintings. So fresh flowers and choya and fabric, literally fabrics from quilts and patterns and clothing. And so those things make their way in.
I wanted to sort of talk about a couple of pieces of work that we have in this show, and one was The Year of the Rat.
Yeah, I mean, the full title is, I think, The Year of the Rat, Snake, and Moth, and it was just right after the pandemic. And I'm not sure if everyone in Joshua Tree had this, but I had suddenly Miller moths just literally like come in, I mean, hundreds. And this was right after the pandemic was, you know, we were dealing with it. And then there was a snake outside. I had a Mojave green. And so that piece was just kind of about like all that other chaos that was coming in the natural world.
And what about there's another piece I think we were going to mention was the Nina Simone Sings the Blues.
Yeah, I just, you know, I don't actually, when I'm working, I don't title the works and then make the painting. I generally know that I'm working under an umbrella of ideas. And so at the end, when I'm looking and reflecting back on the work, again, we were having a lot of social justice issues were coming up over the summer, and there's just like a lot of tribute to Black music, and so it was kind of a way to honor some of the music that we've all been influenced by.
And what another piece was the Oleander and Orange, 100,000 Dead, George Floyd.
Yeah, again, I had I pretty much had NPR on a lot. And so I was just working to news, and as I was making a lot of the hash marks just are this way of counting and processing.
Yeah.
And so the backs of the paintings are dated, you know, like 2020, but I'll usually make a notation of like maybe the start and the end date, just so I can kind of, I mean, I remember in my head what was going on, but it's almost, they act as a visual journal.
Right.
So not all the paintings have the like date spans, but that's more of just a way to jog my memory of specifics, what were going on in our current events.
And I think one of the others was the Desert Back with Mystical Shit #1 Pink. Can you give us a little reference about that? I love the title, and I love the piece.
Yeah, well, oh, thank you. Yeah, you know, when I moved, I mean, those were I think just a couple of years old, but when I moved here, I have a view of the national park and out my studio window, and the flora and fauna that is, I don't have quite a corner view, but it's almost. And so those are things that literally are in my view. They obviously are painted a little bit more psychedelically. but yeah, when I moved here, people would say how magical Joshua Tree was.
Yeah.
And the word magic just kept popping up amongst different people. And I just thought it was really interesting. And that there is this kind of spiritual connection here. And um, so part of that is, and also the real estate ads for, it's like how they describe the property here, desert back.
Right.
So a lot of it just had to do with like how we view landscape here, and also this kind of I don't want to call it hype, but yeah, this kind of that Joshua Tree is this mystical place, and has been for many years in in the kind of collective memory.
Well, I think you captured that very well, because that was my sense of when I saw these two pieces related to this sort of pink orb in the center. And it's again, you were talking about meditation. They both seem very meditative in their view of looking at them. I sort of got that sort of an energy vortex. And again, that's a term that's thrown around a lot out in Joshua Tree, that, we're living in a vortex here. So it had that sense of it. So I really appreciated the work from that standpoint of seeing what you had done over the period of the pandemic. So
Yeah, and I got into kind of raking around a rock. You'll see some of those concentric circles kind of have to do with this meditative, like walking process. And yeah.
well, thank you. We're just curious, where are you from back east? You said you're from the South. Where about?
I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm incredibly happy about the current situation in Georgia right now, and
Yes.
I'm kind of doing everything I can to help that momentum go. And then I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
And then I got my undergraduate degree in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then moved to Chicago to do my graduate study at the University of Illinois at Chicago,
And
and
you
then out
ended
to LA.
up in Joshua Tree. Fantastic.
Yeah, after LA, back to Nashville, and then back to California. So didn't intend on moving as much, but it's been really interesting. It's been a pleasure to meet in person artists in different areas, and so that's been really wonderful about kind of being a little bit more mobile than I anticipated.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we will soon be over the pandemic, and we'll have that opportunity together again amongst people in the community and meet other artists. And I so want to thank you for sharing with us your story today and your work. I would encourage people to check us out at ASHER Gray Gallery. That's at artsy.net. And our featured artist, again, is Mary Addison Hackett. Thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me, Frederick.
Okay, lovely. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.